The morning sun was just breaking over the horizon when I rumbled down the dirt track in my old truck, the kind of morning where the air still smelled of dew and earth, and the world seemed like it might give you a fair chance if you worked hard enough. The road was familiar, comforting even, a ribbon of gravel and dust that had carried me and my family for decades to and from the farm. But as I rounded the last bend, my stomach sank and my foot slammed the brake. There, stretching across the road like a scar, was a brand new iron gate. Thick black bars gleamed in the sunlight, too sturdy to have been thrown up overnight but certainly recent enough to make me feel blindsided. Freshly poured concrete held the posts in place, and bolted across the center was a smug little sign in bright white letters, "For Ivade e Pilby Parci el Peth Fruited." My first thought was that it had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe the county had decided to reroute traffic or repair the road. But before I could even climb out of the truck to get a closer look, I saw her, Karen. There she stood like a sentry guarding a castle that didn't belong to her. Arms folded, one foot tapping impatiently, her platinum, blonde bob swaying as she tilted her head with that permanent expression of disapproval she seemed to have patented. She wore a neatly pressed pastel blouse, slacks without a speck of dirt on them, and designer sunglasses that probably cost more than one of my cows. "You can't use this road anymore," she said the second I opened my door. Her voice was nasal, clipped, and practiced like she'd rehearsed the line in the mirror. I blinked at her, thinking maybe I hadn't heard right. "Excuse me. You heard me." She pointed a manicured finger at the gate like she was revealing a masterpiece. "The HOA board voted last week. This is now restricted access. Only approved vehicles can pass. You'll have to find another route to your farm." The way she said, farm, with that little wrinkle of her nose, made it sound like a dirty word. Like the idea of livestock existing within a few miles of her cookie-cutter neighborhood offended her very soul. "Another route." I barked a laugh, more out of disbelief than humor. "Lady, that's a 40-mile detour. This road is the only way in or out unless you expect me to start flying hay bales in by helicopter." Karen smirked. She was enjoying this. "Not my problem. Rules are rules. Perhaps if you participated in the community, paid your dues like the rest of us." I cut her off, my blood pressure spiking. "I don't live in your community. Never have, never will. This farm has been here for 30 years, long before you or your HOA showed up." Her expression hardened, the smile faltering for just a moment before she recovered. "Well, times change. We're trying to protect our property values. Big trucks driving past, dust blowing into people's yards, the smell from your—" She paused dramatically and waved a hand like she couldn't bring herself to finish the thought. "Operations. It's not exactly desirable for homeowners." My fists clenched at my sides. "You knew the farm was here when you bought your house. Don't act surprised the country smells like the country." Just shrugged, her sunglasses flashing in the sun. "The vote was unanimous. You can appeal if you want, but good luck with that." I stood there for a long moment, staring at the gate, feeling a storm churn in my gut. My livelihood depended on that road. Feed trucks, seed deliveries, veterinarians, all of them needed direct access. Without it, I'd be stranded, forced to waste gas and time on a detour that could kill the farm in less than a season. And that was exactly what Karen wanted. Behind her, I noticed two other HOA board members lingering at a safe distance, sipping coffee from insulated mugs, watching the confrontation like it was their morning entertainment. One of them whispered something to the other, and they both laughed. The humiliation burned hotter than the sun overhead. I wasn't just fighting for convenience, I was being pushed out, erased. Like my family's work didn't matter. I forced myself to take a slow breath. Losing my temper here would only give her more ammunition. "This isn't over," I said, my voice low, steady. Karen's smirk widened again. "Oh, I know. You farmers are always so stubborn. But rules are rules." She turned on her heel, strutted back toward her shiny SUV parked on the shoulder, and called over her shoulder, "Have a nice day." The gate clanged shut behind her, the echo carrying through the trees like a taunt. I climbed back into my truck, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The ride back to the farmhouse was a blur of gravel and anger. I barely noticed the field stretching golden in the distance, the corn whispering in the breeze, or the cattle grazing in their pastures. All I could see was the gate slamming shut and Karen's smug face. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I was pacing in my head. Without supplies, the crops would wither. Without grain, the cattle would grow restless and thin. Without buyers, my income would dry up. I could hear the lutter of the HOA board, already picture them celebrating when my farm finally folded. That was their goal all along: drive me out, pave over my land, and extend their rows of identical houses until there was nothing left of the life I'd built. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of bourbon and a stack of old county maps spread out before me. My father had kept them, yellowed and brittle from decades of handling. I traced my finger along the familiar road, following its line toward the farm, then glanced at the shaded parcels marking the HOA's territory. That iron gate was just a thin mark on paper, but it had real teeth. My eyes drifted over the surrounding land, and that's when I saw it, a faint dotted line, barely visible through the creases in the paper. An old irrigation tunnel, long abandoned, that ran directly beneath the HOA property. My father had told me about it once. Years ago, back when the water table was higher and farmers shared underground channels to distribute flow. Most had collapsed or been forgotten, but the map suggested this one still connected to my land. I sat back, the bourbon warm in my chest, and for the first time that day I smiled. Karen thought she'd boxed me in, but she'd underestimated me. She thought rules and gates would break me, but she didn't understand what it meant to be a farmer. To endure, to adapt, to find a way even when the world tried to shut you down. I folded the map carefully, set it on the table, and leaned back in my chair. The anger was still there, sharp and hot, but now it was mixed with something else, a determination. If Karen wanted to play games, I'd play too. And by the time I was finished, she'd regret ever trying to block my road. The nights grew longer and quieter once I began the work. Every evening after the sun sank behind the hills, to our residents tucked themselves into their cookie-cutter houses, I slipped outside with a lantern, gloves, and a shovel. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of earth and grass, and I could almost feel the weight of my ancestors on my shoulders as I chipped away at the soil. Farming had taught me patience, and patience was exactly what this job demanded. The first few feet were the hardest. The ground was stubborn, roots tangling like fingers trying to hold me back. I braced my back and dug, one scoop at a time, the sound muffled under the cover of night. Soon I reached what I'd been hoping for, remnants of the old irrigation tunnel my father had once told me about. The air smelled damp, old stone lining the woven rows. My lantern's glow stretched down a dark corridor, half collapsed but still intact enough to give me hope. By day, I played the part. I'd drive past the iron gate slowly, Karen sometimes stationed there with her morning coffee, watching me like a hawk to make sure I didn't try to break the rules. I'd tip my hat politely, though inside I wanted to spit on the ground. Then I'd take the long detour, burning fuel and wasting hours, just so she'd think she'd won. But by night, when no one was watching, I carried out my plan beneath her feet. Each shovel of dirt became a small act of defiance. I hauled out loose earth in buckets, reinforced walls with wood I scavenged from the barn, and laid planks across soft patches to keep the tunnel from caving in. My hands blistered, my back ached. But the work fed me in a way the fields couldn't. Every inch gained meant freedom. Every night closer to completion was a promise that I'd never let Karen or her board choke the life out of my farm. 3 weeks in, I finally broke through to the far side. I'll never forget the moment. The lantern's light spilled onto my boots as the last wall of dirt gave way, and a gust of fresh country air blew into the tunnel. I stepped out into my fields, the corn rustling like applause around me. My tunnel was ready. The first test run came the next morning. I guided the feed truck carefully into the entrance, the headlights bouncing off the reinforced walls. The tires crunched softly on the planks I'd laid, the engine rumbling like a beast hidden beneath the neighborhood. I held my breath as we crept forward, half expecting the whole thing to collapse, but it held. The truck emerged on my land, safe and sound, as if the gate on the road had never existed. I leaned against the hood and laughed, the sound echoing across the pasture. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly free, but fate, it seemed, had more in store. A few nights later, I went back into the tunnel to widen a section that felt too tight. My shovel struck something hollow. I froze, the sound ringing strangely in the enclosed space. Clearing the dirt away, I uncovered a wooden crate, old and weather-stained, shoved against the wall. My heart thumped as I pried it open. Inside were stacks of folders and boxes filled with papers. At first, I thought it was just old farming records left behind by whoever had last used the irrigation system. But as I flipped through the documents, my lantern's glow revealed something far more sinister. Contracts, bank statements, receipts for maintenance projects that had never happened. The letterhead at the top of every page read, Silver Creek Homeowners Association. I sat back on my heels, stunned. The papers were detailed, meticulous, and damning. Thousands of dollars funneled into repairs that never existed. Landscaping jobs billed but never performed. Payments approved by the board and signed off with Karen's neat, looping signature. It was fraud, plain and simple, and by the looks of it, it had been going on for years. My mind raced. If the homeowners knew their fees were being stolen, Karen and her cronies would be finished. The gate, the harassment, the smug control, all of it would crumble. This wasn't just revenge handed to me on a silver platter. It was justice. For the next week, I spent as much time scanning and copying as I did farming. Every night, I carried bundles of the evidence back to the farmhouse, feeding them through my old scanner until I had digital files of everything. I made backups on USB drives, printed copies, even sealed one set in a waterproof bag I buried under the barn floor just in case. If Karen tried to fight dirty, I'd be ready. When the time came, I didn't hesitate. One quiet morning, while the dew still clung to the grass, I slipped into town and mailed thick envelopes to every homeowner in the HOA. I sent copies to the county commissioner, the state attorney general, and even the local newspaper. By the time I returned home, the fuse had been lit. The fallout spread like wildfire. Within days, homeowners were storming out of their houses, waving letters and shouting at each other in the streets. Karen tried to stand her ground at first, insisting the documents were fake, some elaborate plot to discredit her. But once the county commissioner announced an official investigation, her tune changed. Suddenly, she was nowhere to be seen. Her SUV missing from the driveway, her morning vigils at the gate over. Rumors swirled fast. Some said she'd drained the HOA account, others whispered her husband had left after discovering the truth. The gate didn't last long. County workers rolled in with trucks and power tools, cutting through the iron bars and hauling the whole structure away. I stood at the edge of my property, watching the metal fall with a satisfying clang, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without rage burning in my chest. The board dissolved shortly after, most of its members fleeing before the investigation could dig too deep. The neighborhood was left in disarray, homeowners angry and ashamed, but at least freed from Karen's iron grip. As for me, I kept on farming. The feed trucks rolled in again, the cattle fattened on grain, and the corn stood tall in the summer sun. My days became quieter, filled with the honest rhythm of work instead of the gnawing stress of conflict. But every now and then, as I drove down that newly opened road, I'd glance toward the houses. Sometimes I'd see her, Karen, standing on her porch, arms crossed, glaring at me like she could burn my fields down with her eyes alone. Her voice no longer carried weight. She was just another angry neighbor now, left with the wreckage of her own corruption. When our eyes met, I didn't scowl or shout. I just tipped my hat, a smile tugging at my lips. Because in the end, was still mine. The farm still stood, and the truth had buried her deeper than any tunnel ever could. And every time I drove through that stretch of road, I thought of my father's old maps, the yellowed paper that had led me underground. He'd always said the land holds secrets, if you know where to look. This time, it gave me more than survival. It gave me victory.